Hi, everyone. Thank you for being back for our third session of See the Future. That was a great panel. Thank you, Fred, Eric, and Aaron. Just amazing, amazing things going on there. Some big challenges for sure. Really excited to end this panel with some great guests on enabling innovation ecosystems for smart communities. Today, I'm joined by Victor Carr from the city of Austin and Candelaria Mendoza from the city of San Antonio. Victor, Candelaria, how are y'all both doing today?
Hey, great. Great day. It's a little hot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
ditto.
yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the really unique things about our series being monthly is that, we can talk about some of the broader issues, but also drill down on some of the things that you guys are facing in real time and how the shifts just over the last week have likely impacted some of the things you guys are already doing or working on when we might have thought like, hey, the pandemic was behind us. Now certain things are rolling back. So just before we get into it, I was wanted to see if both of you could just give a quick overview of your role and your positions there, both in San Antonio and Austin. And Victor, if we could start with you.
Yes, I am the acting deputy CIO for the CTM infrastructure team. And I've been with the city for about 25 plus years. I was with Austin Energy, our public utility, for about 17 of those years.
Thank you.
Hi, Candelaria Mendoza. I'm the Smart City Coordinator at the Office of Innovation for the City of San Antonio. Actually, my path to smart cities is kind of non-traditional. I am actually a librarian. I've worked in libraries for about 12 years before I applied for and was selected for the Smart Cities Coordinator position here for the City of San Antonio. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, welcome. And Victor, you touched on it, and one of one of our great opportunities is to hear from those different perspectives going on in two unique cities. They're two of the fastest growing cities for all those who are paying attention and doing some amazing things and amazing work, but also have some big challenges to solve. And getting to know both of the work that you have done, Victor, you mentioned both previously with Austin Energy and now with the city during some very interesting times. It's going to be good to dive into some of these questions here. So I'll just kind of jump right in it in terms of it. And Candelaria, you mentioned your role as a librarian, and I just want to see if you could talk a little bit about how you transitioned from that and then coming into a new innovation office and what were some of the maybe one of some of those strengths that you were able to build upon from your librarian career to bring that unique perspective to this new office within the city of San Antonio.
Yeah, definitely. Before I was even considering working with the Smart Cities team, we actually had engaged with the Office of Innovation that had been within the city for quite a few years, going back and forth on kind of digital inclusion. Me, as a San Antonio Public Library department, we were kind of advocating to ensure that digital inclusion was going to be part of Smart Cities DNA, because that's when the city was kind of figuring out, yes, we're going to have a team. What are the areas that the Smart Cities team should be focused on? And so when that was being kind of workshopped, we were heavily advocating for aspects of digital inclusion, because we always have felt that if we're going to be a smart city, we need to make sure that our community is connected, because as we roll in further and further into a digital economy, those separation between those people that are connected and have the abilities and the skill sets to take up full advantage of those opportunities, and those that don't, we're just going to keep getting worse. So yeah, I think the skill sets that I kind of brought to the team, because we did gain having digital inclusion as part of Smart Cities DNA, was that community engagement and partnership piece. I had spent a lot of time kind of building that network while I was working at the library. And in libraries, you're always engaging with your community. They're coming to you, they're probably some of the most underserved and underrepresented members of our community. They're already coming to us because they need help and assistance in some form or fashion. So I was bringing that to the forefront with our Smart Cities team in San Antonio, that I could easily plug in other partners and kind of help with the collaboration of our projects and our messaging.
Thank you. And Victor, yeah, would love to learn how you got tapped to kind of be working on the initiatives there with the city.
Well, there is a person by the name of Andres Carvalho who came up with the term smart grid. I'm pretty sure everyone knows who that is.
Yeah.
Well, day one of him coming up with that term, he pointed at me and said, "Make this work." So if you go back that far, vehicle electrification was one of the biggest things of how you get vehicles on the road and get them charged on our current infrastructure. So I was kind of tasked with coming up with the communications piece to that puzzle. So if you look at the plug, so to speak, there's 2 communication pins on there. That was my idea. I came up with those. So when you're kind of tapped to kind of do some innovations projects, you really don't have any bounds, but you also don't have any structure. So you have to kind of figure it out on the way, and hopefully things work. Your goals are just making something to where someone else can kind of make better. So if you fast forward, that turned into something that, hey, we have a resource that can work on advanced projects. Let's give him all of them. So I became one-man innovation shop for Austin Energy at that point.
Yeah, and then now to the current role, how about that transition there?
Well, that's very interesting. And that the more that I began to kind of pull city resources together from different departments and creating cross-functional teams, it kind of put me into a situation to where I needed to have a little bit more reach into how to manage all of those areas. So hence the acting role of the deputy CIO kind of came into play kind of naturally as everything kind of progressed.
Oh yeah, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that background and setting some context to both of you. So Victor, kind of just to dive right back in, what are some of those key advanced technologies you and your team working across these different agencies are exploring to bring to the city of Austin at this time?
Well, currently we have a research agreement with UT Austin for policy engineering and environmental studies and cultural research. We're also kind of in a planning phase of looking at PIN technologies and deployments, which is public, I think it's public infrastructure. I always forget network nodes. So deploying some of those around the city so that we can do a lot more things, communicate with a lot more IoT items. And I can definitely go into a lot more detail on that. So let me know if anyone wants to know. But one of those things is being able to control autonomous systems, whether that be drones or vehicles as well. So our transportation department is heavily engaged in some of those conversations, because not only do we need to know where these devices are going, where they are at point in time, but also where people are and how to keep people safe in this environment.
Yeah. So a quick follow-up there. So how challenging has it been? You have these big ideas, these big ambitious things to accomplish, and then you during the pandemic, how challenging has that been to push those ideas forward?
Well, it was already challenging dealing with resources that were already kind of allocated to other things in their work days. But it came extremely challenging because now these resources are kind of reallocated to things that are kind of more business essential because of the pandemic and what kind of changes it made for the city. So it got very difficult to do so, but we were able to get a lot more policy generation done at that point of kind of designing what the needs were and the business cases were for the city.
Got it. And now, Candelaria, turning to you, I love that you kind of hearing the story of bringing digital inclusion as part of the DNA of the innovation team, and we have seen many of the projects that's obviously a key priority and has remained. But what have been some of the priorities within the innovation team that maybe have shifted over the past year?
I mean, I think definitely when COVID hit, I can relate, Victor, to your statement about, get into play without a lot of restrictions, but it's also then building, there's no structure, right? So yeah, I mean, for us, when COVID hit, with our, with the city, a lot of it did kind of become the focus of kind of core functions and businesses for the community, tied back to health and affordable housing and rental assistance. So for us, our office basically got tapped as a special projects team for the city manager's office. So when there was a need for us to create a dashboard that showed, where COVID was, who had been tested, where the rise and when it came down, we had to pull a bunch of different partners and get them to do something that really doesn't happen in government, right? React quickly, provide data in a public forum that is both transparent and evolving on a basic daily basis. So yeah, a lot of the things that we ended up doing were just meeting immediate needs of the city. So we created a COVID-19 dashboard with multiple departments across the city to ensure that we were being as transparent as possible, because our community wanted to know about COVID-19, where it was, what the percentage was, where they could go get vaccinations, all of that stuff. And obviously trying to make it as user-friendly as possible, and then also give the community access to that data. So that was one of the pieces that we kind of got tagged onto to help with the city. Other pieces, to your point, Jason, digital inclusion, that just blew up. It went from like, hey, pull together some data, let's see where the digital divide in San Antonio is, to everybody knocking on all of our doors, city council, our city manager, county judge. Everybody was kind of like, what are you going to do for digital inclusion? We need solutions and we need them now. So a lot of it was just kind of coordinating on how we can help support short-term solutions in the space of digital inclusion by providing hotspots, doing money matching for the Texas Education Agency, the Operation Connectivity. So a lot of it was us trying to be as flexible as possible, as nimble as possible, and reacting, basically trying to be supportive into what our community needed at that time. Data governance, because of that dashboard, also kind of rose to the top of our priorities. There's not a lot of guidelines set up in the city of San Antonio around data governance and how do we share data and how do we make it more usable for the community. So we've also been working on building a data governance policy. So yeah, I mean, it's been a very tough year for the community, but it's been a very kind of an opportunity to reflect on what's really important in the space of smart cities, and us kind of creating some foundational pieces that the city will now have from now kind of moving forward to hopefully, at least in some aspects, move us from being reactive to being proactive and intentional with what we're doing with our data, and also with projects within our community.
Great. So that kind of leads to a quick follow-up there. So you're seeing some key lessons learned that you're able to bring into the work you guys are doing that could possibly help drive future programs forward?
Yeah, so as I mentioned with the data governance, we worked that through. We ended up getting certification through What Works City Silver. So that was a nice recognition, but for us, that stuff is more of a reward to the work that's happening, but we don't take that as, oh, okay, now we're done. Every year, it's just gonna have to be an iterative process to continue that work, because there's still a lot more that we can do to be better. The other piece is in the space of technology. We're obviously doing some street lights. It's been raining a lot in Texas, San Antonio, especially. I don't know how it is with other cities, but flooding obviously is something that also is kind of keeping at the top, and that sustainability aspect of climate change and what do we do with our climate adaptation plan. So we've been doing some piloting in our streetlights and putting some sensors for flood detection, and also exploring opportunities on how we can continue to do pilots in that space. Because again, changes in our environment are happening pretty quickly, and we just need to make sure that we're being proactive about things like that within, as much as we can within the city of San Antonio, and be a model, because I know obviously the city is big. So when we do something and we make a change, because of how big we are, it usually creates, you know, at least an opportunity for people to have a conversation of whether they will do it as well. So we definitely don't take that responsibility lightly. And that's going to be a continued phase as we move forward with our technology that we're piloting. And then in digital inclusion, we work to create a digital inclusion roadmap with the private sector. So we had Toyota at the forefront, Charles Butt Foundation, HEB, Spurs Give, all gave dollars to pay for Boston Consulting Group to help us do a digital inclusion roadmap, because we wanted to be prepared and shovel ready for when all the federal dollars came to play, that we can kind of plug into and build out. So our bold goal is that we want to have all of our San Antonio residents have the ability to get affordable quality broadband regardless of where they live within the city and the county. And so we are building this partnership in order to at least have the foundation to do that. And obviously the work of advocating for hundreds of millions of dollars is still at play. So we're expecting money to come from the American Jobs Plan. That's still looking like a ticket of $2 trillion. And we definitely want to get some of that pie so that we can build out our networks here in San Antonio and improve our digital inclusion for our residents. So those are kind of the big monsters that we're kind of playing with right now.
Great. Yeah, those are definitely massive monsters there, and a good segue to you, Victor, because to get to those points, to get shovel ready, there is a lot that you guys also need to do, especially like you mentioned earlier, where you're working across universities, transportation department, and other municipal agencies. So this concept of stakeholder buy-in, you know, not just from the folks doing the work, but at the top, and you're talking about next generation technologies that some stakeholders just might not be familiar with, but at the end of the day, they help improve our communications and digital infrastructure. So can you talk about how important that work is and how challenging it could be when you're working across groups to build that buy-in to push projects forward?
Well, here's the challenge. And I'll say this as across the board, most city departments aren't designed to work together. I'm not saying City of Austin, just most city departments and all of the city units that I've visited. And so in order to kind of start reaching across the aisle, so to speak, there's already going to be some apprehension, not within really the technical people, but once you start trying to get buy-in, you're going to need executive sponsorship. So if your executive sponsorship is kind of splintered because you have multiple entities that have different leadership, and of course, they're going to need their needs to be met. They're all going to be different, and it's going to be hard to kind of design a goal based around the needs of every executive. So we really try to do it more from a grassroots, so to speak, way of doing things, to where we can kind of get the seed planted within the guys that are actually hands-on and doing the work, and kind of let it go up from there. One of the scenarios was our UAS drone team. So the drone team is made up of every single entity within the city that has drones and that are flying drones, and they have different use cases for their need for drones, as well as IoT devices. So they all have different assistant city managers, so to speak. So when you have to actually take for them to do anything, we have to notify their executive, and that sometimes that kind of, creates, a little bit of issues just as we move along. But kind of once you get out of that, everything starts to actually run pretty smooth. What you actually notice is some of the things you didn't think about, you actually get those questions answered from those other entities that didn't know what you were doing in the first place. So once they kind of start getting educated, they can come up with some ideas for you that you didn't think about, and you can actually move forward with those. But that is very important that you actually get that done and get that done early. Start including, people in the discussions as soon as possible, so that you can get those things out of the way. You can get kind of those roadblocks out of the way.
Got it. Just a quick note to our audience that we please submit your questions. We'd be happy to fit those in, as we still have about 15 minutes here, but would love to try to get some audience questions in. You can drop them in the chat. So Victor, when you're doing all this, obviously you guys can see what the use cases are, but how do you start to communicate like how these collaborations can bring down costs and ultimately bring benefits to the community? What are some of those challenges of communicating the benefits of those type of collaborations?
Well, it's kind of difficult because you have to explain to, let's say, the public, you have to explain to them why spending their money is a good idea on a new investment. And it's very difficult to do that because you can't really prove innovative technologies until you can prove them. So it's kind of, where's the cart and where's the horse in this scenario? And then how do you kind of get that out? So what we try to do is we try to use bulletins and things of that nature to kind of let people understand, here are the benefits of what we're working on, and kind of working it that way so that they're expecting something as we're working through it. So at that point, they can actually look at different points in time and different milestones and have certain expectations met. And I think that's kind of the best way to actually get some of our innovations projects done in situations where, I don't know if many city governments have DevOps teams or any kind of services that deal with innovations to where they have a big pot of money, all the money that they need. The finances just aren't there. You can't really prove that you need that money without having something in hand to show for it. So, and not having that, if you kind of show, here are the benefits of the things that we're working on, and let them kind of push that boat a little farther, it's easy to work with.
Yeah, fantastic insight there. And so Candelaria, you mentioned a lot about some of the work you do. It's grassroots, getting out there in the community. What have some of your team, what have been those benefits you guys have seen from doing that? I do recall you guys doing several workshops around several initiatives from digital inclusion, but also asking the communication a lot. What have been those benefits of that outreach?
Yeah, I think we try hard to have community engagement be at the core of what we do, of like checking the pulse of what are our community's needs and actually going to them and kind of dialoguing and having workshops. So yeah, we've had things, everything from like digital inclusion conversations to, bias in public, as we were kind of exploring what it meant to have a dashboard with COVID-19 and who, and, rates and things like that. And also just all of the things that you don't think about with data, right? And how you're asking questions to your community that's very diverse. And then just before COVID hit, we had actually started a model of sandbox, Smart SA sandbox, where we want to have kind of this iterative and continuous cycle of feedback from our community. So one of the models that we do and that we continue to do is doing pilots. So to Victor's point, I think our buy-in is kind of at the top level, and we have been given a bucket of dollars to play with emerging technology, but it has to be in the space of piloting. We have to prove out that that technology works for a certain use case, and then we have conversations about how do we scale that, where is the money going to come from. And so in our space of piloting, that's where we really try to convey to our community what it is that we're doing. They get to see the technology. So one of the things that we've been doing is streetlights. We, actually brought down the equipment so they can see them. We showed them the dashboard of what the data set looks like on the back end. We're trying to see if, or we're pushing that data out in a public data portal so that they also have access to it, again, with the disclaimer that it's intended for this small purpose, and it's not a data set that's going to be statistically valid or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think for us, that touch point with the community is really, really important. And I think it helps build our advocacy, because we definitely do need occasionally either a partner to step up and support us and advocate for us on our behalf, and or like the private sector. So that digital inclusion roadmap was a perfect example. We didn't go knocking on the private sector's door to have them advocate for us. They actually knocked on our door and said, we heard that you all doing digital inclusion. We understand why it's important. What do you need from us to ensure that your leadership understands it's a priority? So they are actually calling the city manager. They're the ones having conversations at social events with the mayor. They're the ones, setting up meetings with the judge and talking about why it's important for us to do this. So that's obviously been very, very helpful to ensure that our leadership has an understanding and gives us support when then they hear a proposal or recommendation coming from the staff.
Fantastic. I think a good follow-up probably I think this is good for both of you in this. There's a lot of talk about digital, new technology, connecting across new agencies. So start with you, Victor. How have you seen this cyber question both come into play and the keeping and maybe even some of the data privacy? Are you seeing those questions starting to come up more in your meetings, whether or from like public feedback?
Yes, in both. One of them, and so when we start talking about the drones, if there's a drone in your backyard, what is it doing? Also, the security of it. Is it our drone? So is it a police drone or is it a fire drone? So some of those things were immediately concerns with the city itself. When we start having kind of some of the unrest downtown, the protests and things of that nature, we had drones flying all over the place, and it identified a lot of things that we wouldn't have been able to see. So once the community starts seeing kind of the benefits of what they were doing, they kind of start buying more into it and stop asking so many questions about the privacy of it, because they saw that there was a need. But there's other technologies that we kind of started talking about that kind of got the community kind of concerned as well, kind of like facial recognition. So one of the discussions that I was having was, hey, let's put on, some HoloLens or Google Glass, have the police set so that they can actually go look into a crowd. And if there's anyone that's on the list of in their criminal justice list, they'd actually be able to see them, point them out, and be able to make decisions off of that. As well as being able to have cameras to show those faces. Let's say that a crime was committed in one sector, you captured that facial recognition and it shows up at another site, you would actually know where that person is. So those are some of the things that we were kind of having conversations about. But the not only the public, kind of the lawyers and things of that nature, everyone kind of got a little bit antsy about it. They're just like, we don't know if that's something we want to move forward with. But those are kind of some of the conversations that you have with innovations of where do you push that envelope.
Yeah, and Candelaria, how about from your side there?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had similar conversations about technologies, and not only how they were intended to use, but maybe some side opportunities of how they could potentially be used. But maybe that opportunity wasn't really one of the reasons why we implement technology. So for us, it was really about creating more of guidelines and policies that would help people make decisions and have intentionality about what it is that we want the technology to do for us, and being really clear about how we're going to use the technology and not allow for these other open door opportunities, right? Like, nope, we said we were going to use it for this purpose. This is what we agreed on. This is what we told our community we were going to do. So if there's another opportunity that opens itself to that technology, I think we have to take that back to another step of reassessment, right? To ensure that our community is going to be okay with it, that our leadership is going to be okay with it, and then again, inform and do more of that PR. So we are creating a data governance policy that embeds a lot of this into it, of what is the city willing and not willing to do with technology, with AI, with facial recognition, where are we going to kind of draw the line as far as the benefits of being able to like find a criminal versus, some of the negative consequences of some of that technology, that it could be biased towards people of color, and all of the good stuff. So we're in the midst of having those conversations, and we still have a long way to go, but we definitely want there to be something in writing that, regardless of who's in council or who's in leadership, have guidelines and principles that they can follow as we do RFPs, and work with our vendors so that there's an understanding of what we will and won't do with certain technologies. But again, that doesn't exist quite yet. We're working on that.
Thank you. Yeah, a few more minutes left here, but Victor, would want to get some of your feedback. Obviously, you're working across different technologies. You mentioned several of them. Can you put your futurist hat on for a little bit and say, like, what if you had to pick one or two that you see really being widely beneficial to communities? Where would you put your 10 cents?
I think everything is built around data, and being able to get the community data faster to them, and being able to get city services to them faster that way. I think that's kind of the future. One of the things that we're working on in augmented reality is to actually identify city services that exist in neighborhoods and downtown and things like that, to where when you actually go to get your digging permit, you would actually be able to get a file and be able to put on whatever device you have or use your cell phone and kind of be able to look and see where everything is. So rather than wait 3 days for that to happen, you get that immediately. And that's something that actually could be done right now. I do have some other kind of really futuristic stuff. I don't want to discuss those because y'all may run me out of town if I talk about those. But that's one of the things that we're working on, that just getting those city capabilities to the citizens faster and getting that data to them faster. And I believe it's possible. Things are starting to become available from vendors and manufacturers to make a lot of these things possible.
And Candelaria, I know your team sees a lot of interesting stuff come across your desk. Like what jumps out to you of like what can really be a beneficial technology to communities if deployed in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree with Victor on the data aspects. Making data-driven decisions is it's really important, especially in the space of smart cities. But data, can be manipulated in different ways to do different things and to make different decisions. So I think at the core of that, it's the integrity of how it's being analyzed and then regurgitated and provided to the public. So I think we're always going to have to be critical with any technology that does that kind of automatically. But that is a skill set that we continue to have challenges around, of getting people in our departments that know how to do data analytics, and aren't trying to cater that data to, answer somebody's question in the affirmative or, the confirmation bias kind of situation. That it really does need to be kind of an integrity aspect of that. But yeah, as far as like a futuristic piece, I mean, we've seen some pretty amazing AV projects of how in the future maybe we won't need to buy our own cars and we can all just use these sharing systems that would kind of disconnect and take you all the way home, but then it becomes a trolley and there's a bunch of people using them. But again, back to being connected, it's all about that infrastructure. So at the end of the day, I think we're all going to have to make sure that we have the broadband access that we need in order for those technologies to succeed. Because a lot of the reason why we can't put AV in certain areas is because they need certain types of infrastructure in place in order for them to do what they need to do. So yeah, it's a little bit of a domino effect, but it would be cool for us to minimize, street traffic and kind of use a shared system rather than all of us having 2 or 3 different cars.
And we're working on that with the military. I think it's actually starting at our Camp Raybury site pretty soon. They're starting to research about actually moving people with drones big enough to be able to actually put 2 people inside of it. So that's being tested pretty soon. So we're getting to that point to where you're right. If the infrastructure is not there, I don't think you want to be in a drone taxi and get lost some kind of way. But it's starting to happen.
Yeah, dropped calls and dropped people, totally different things.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. Well, we're just about time, but I want to give both of you the last word. I think, thankfully, both Austin and San Antonio have a lot more resources at stake. You have some key technology partners, but I wonder if you could both end on a piece of advice for smaller communities, just going down that road of how do I take my community into the future? What advice do you have for smaller cities, really just trying to find out where to start in their journey? Victor, start with you.
I'd say partner with a bigger city. Take advantage of those resources that are available, because small towns, you'll never have those resources. So partner with them and kind of don't recreate the wheel. There's something that already exists for everything that you're thinking about. Maybe not in my case, because I'm kind of far out there, but there's always someone that has already started some of these initiatives, and you can actually start from where they're left off instead of kind of starting from the beginning and having the same headaches that they had.
Candelaria?
Yeah, I want to second that. I think one of the things that we've been doing a lot, especially during this time of COVID, is knowledge sharing and picking each other's brains. Especially, we were all kind of in the space of never been before, right? Never been in a pandemic. How do you do things? How do you advocate for jobs that have been frozen? Or how do you advocate for doing projects and continuing the momentum and the work that you're doing? So I definitely would second the reaching out to another city and kind of doing that collaboration. And then also just if you're trying to build something even within your city, find that one director or assistant director that seems to know the pulse of your council or your city manager, and like become his or her best friend, because they understand either how to relay the information to those stakeholders, or they understand what the stakeholders value. And so they're going to be able to give you some pretty great advice on how to package it to gain support so that you can little by little gain momentum in what you want to do. We have a few of them here in the city of San Antonio, and we're always kind of pulling them in to help us, because it just always seems like, it's like teacher's pet, right? When they say it, it like clicks. But it also is a skill set that, we can learn and start implementing in how we relay information. So it's very, very helpful.
Well, Victor, Candelaria, thank you so much. It was a great session. So much to go over. And Victor, we're going to have to come back to you on some of those wild ideas, because I think we need more of those for sure. Keep up the amazing work both of you are doing. We're here at Z Prime. We're big fans, but we're looking forward to continuing to watch the work you guys are doing. And thanks so much for being part of the session. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron Otan, who will kind of close us out. And thank you again all for joining.